As you can see, it has gotten super crowded in the garage, and the only way to fix that is to get rid of some of these parts, starting with this huge QA1 suspension setup. Stick around. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the garage, and today we are doing our first modifications to the new 1970 Chevelle. And all of this is being brought to you by QA1. Shout out. Listen, I've been using QA1 on every project I've ever done since I've started working on cars, essentially. Love their stuff, and so I reached out to them last year. Actually, it would have been like November, December of 22. So yeah, over a year ago, and said, hey, I got a project going on with an A-body. They said, what do you want? We'll send you some stuff, no problem. And they sent us a full stage 2 handling kit that was gonna go on the 442. Well, listen, this is one of the reasons that I decided to get rid of the 442. QA1 hooks us up with this awesome suspension kit. I'm not going to waste it on something that's rusted out and about to fall apart, and thus the 1970 Chevelle. This thing is mint, cherry, and deserving of a full QA1 suspension. So on top of that, we're going in with a Quick Performance 9-inch and disc brakes from Willwood. This thing is going to be just as modernized as possible on the drivetrain. You know, we'll get into doing engine transmission stuff later on, but for now, we got to get rid of these drum brakes, get this QA1 stuff jammed on the car, and make this car handle, control, drive like a dream. Couple quick tips whenever you're doing something like dropping an axle on these. Obviously, you know the ones to loosen the lug nuts before you jack the back end up. We're going to jack it up, put our jack stands underneath the frame, let the back end droop a little bit, and then lift the axle just slightly where it's not at full droop as we start unbolting things. But what I also like to do is remove the lid from the master cylinder and use a vacuum brake bleeder to suck all the fluid out of the brake lines. That way, whenever we're moving this thing around, we're just not leaking brake fluid everywhere. Okay, as you can see, we've got the axle up in the air, jack stands under the frame, right in front of where the lower control arm mounts. That way we can get in here and work on everything. But essentially, what's going on is we're in full droop, which means that shocks are holding the axles up while the springs back there push the axle down. And what we want to do is just barely jack up this pumpkin enough to relieve the strain on the shocks and then undo the shocks so we can let the axle droop the rest of the way, get the springs out of the way, and then get the control arms. So we've got upper control arms, which you're probably not going to be able to really see back there very well. Then we've got the lower control arms, both those getting replaced by QA1. The springs will be going away as we're going to a coilover setup. And in fact, our Quick Performance axle only has provisions for the coilover setups. Okay, the rear axle is out, and we're literally working on the tailgate of my truck because there's just no room in the garage right now with all the tables and stuff. So here are the uppers and here are the lowers that we're replacing. And you'll see a lot of times that these will have pipes that have been put in them or welded into place, or they'll have a piece of strap welded on the bottom to give them some rigidity, because these like to twist. These like to twist, all that stuff. So we are going back in with these beauties right here. Here's our lowers from QA1, fully boxed. We've got our mounts for our sway bar, and those have a collar going through them, so even those aren't going to crush down if they get torqued down tight as all get out. Comes with new hardware, which is why this box was open, because I wanted to make sure there was new hardware in here in case I needed to order some, because mine was not going to work. Oh goodness. Oh goodness, why is this so far up in there? It's because that lady that cut me off in the Mercedes yesterday and I had to hit the brakes. Oh God, I hope you're enjoying this. Oh. Oh. Okay. Here's our uppers. There's actually instructions for these. Interestingly enough, comes with new axle bushings. I'll probably put these on the shelf and save them for later because we're putting a new axle in that already has new bushings. I don't know. I'll have to think about that because those things are a pain in the butt to get out if you've ever done the upper bushings on an A-body. But here's our adjustable. Man, look at these. Aren't these like a piece of jewelry? Here's our adjustable uppers. And what we'll do is, yeah, these are basically already set up to be a stock length. Double check them before you install them. But ideally what we want is to go ahead and get these set to a stock length, get them up in the car. That way we can install our new axle. Man, the fronts have a nice Heim joint in there. It's going to be solid. Solid, solid, solid. Looks like a tight fit. And then, last but not least, is the, let's see here. What do they call this? Adjustable frame supports. So, and I'm not exactly sure. Okay. So these mount to the body side of where the trailing arms go. So it ties the upper to the lower to give you just one more step of rigidity on your rear end setup. So want to make sure and go through that. It comes with longer hardware because obviously the frame side or the body side of your hardware that comes with just the trailing arms is not going to fit. So let's swap that out. And then let's see what else. That's the front sway bar. Oh, the shocks. Let me get this stuff thrown up underneath the car. Then we'll take a look at the shocks and stuff because that'll be the last thing that we install after the axle goes in. We'll go ahead and get the axle in place, then throw the shocks underneath there. Well, the proverbial wrench has been thrown into the gears. Yeah, twisted off the rear brake line. Essentially the fitting that goes on the axle that splits out to both rear brakes. I bought a new one of those. And so you got a soft line that goes up to the frame that ties into the rear brake line. It's broke. I think I've got a set of brand new brake lines down in stores though. Fingers crossed. So it's not a big ordeal. There's a distribution block up front that ties into. As long as I can get the brake line there broke loose, which shouldn't be an issue because the line's bad already. You know, it's just getting the fitting out clean. May have to, well, let's just say, hopefully the fitting comes out clean on that one. Just stretch out and run a new rear brake line. So, 1-2 day project may have just turned into like a 3 or 4 day project, but what else is new? Okay, I wanted to take a quick break to show you what I did to get this rear axle in. These triangulated ones can be pretty hard by yourself. Leaf springs are a lot easier. But essentially, I got all my bars hanging. I'm keeping everything loose on there, even the uppers. And then I slid the axle in, not on this, but on a furniture dolly. And that was able to get the far upper bolt through the housing, and then you can lift up on this side, slide the furniture dolly out, and I put it on this jack stand here. And then I use this ATV jack for everything. In fact, I've gotten rid of all of my transmission jacks because that ATV jack works great for transmissions, axles, stuff like this. So putting that underneath there, I went in with a block of wood to keep the pinion pointed up, and then just jacked it in place, jacked it up, pulled the axle over until the other upper control arm bolted up. So now if those are in place, I can jack it up, put it back on jack stands. Be easy to rotate to get the lower control arms bolted into place. Then we can let the unit hang, get the shocks ready to go up in there, and once that's kind of done, we can start tightening everything down and the rear axle will be in place. So if you've ever done any QA1s before, you know, make sure and use anti-seize where your collars are at. We've got the bearings on here on top of it. This is all ready to go in the car. But what I wanted to talk about was a couple things in particular on this installation. For one, these are the brackets that go on the axle housing. They come with another piece that goes in here. Our axle is set up for these, so this extra piece is not needed. Now, they still fit over the coilovers, and that's because normally whenever you have this extra piece in here, you have to run spacers. We checked to make sure that there'd be no binding or anything like that whenever it was all mounted up, and we're good to go there. Now, the top plates. Top plates go on. You've got a stud on here and a bolt hole that's going to go through and mount in the where the shock was at. This hole needs to be drilled out. Just use like a magnet or something, because you're going to have to fish it in there a ways to drop it in that hole to get to it and tighten that down. But pretty simple. I want to show you this outside of the car because it's going to be a little bit hard to see what I'm doing up underneath the car. Okay, it's getting dark, so we're going to go ahead and wrap this video up. I basically have one more shock to install, then the back end's pretty much done minus the sway bar, which we'll cover that in the next video, where I also dive in and do the rear brakes with the wheelwood kit and stuff on there. But I've run out of time for this weekend. I got plans tomorrow that's going to keep this thing on the back burner for another couple days. And with the broken, oh, excuse me as I reseat this collar, with the broken brake lines, I'm going to have to get some more parts on order. It is what it is. You're dealing with a car that's this old, you're going to run into some issues and get them all sorted out. But I do want to give another big shout out to QA1. Thanks as always for supporting the channel. If you got any questions about QA1 stuff, feel free to hit up the comments. I've been installing this stuff for a decade now. Love QA1 shocks, in particular their coilovers. Got, you know, the Nova's completely set up on it, got the Monte Carlo set up on it, and now the Chevelle is going to be dialed in with this stage 2 handling kit. And also, if you have questions, you can hit them up, contact them. They're super great. They can answer stuff. And even if they don't have something listed on the website for your particular application, trust me, they can put something together. So they just came out with the new generation Chevy suspension stuff. I had QA1s on there long before any kits were ever put together, just by piecemealing this stuff. That's the nice thing, is you can buy different tops, different bottoms, you know, different link spring shocks, different spring rates, all that stuff is so universal that if you reach out to those guys and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do, they're going to be able to sort you out. There should be a link to them in every single description of every video I've got out there, because I'm so excited to have QA1 as part of the channel. So I'm going to button it up, clean the garage, go take a shower and get something to eat because I'm starving. You guys know the drill. Thanks for stopping by the garage. Remember, ABT, always be tuning.